Good morning, church.
Good morning.
Which, somebody said good morning, Dwight. Thank you. Is this, I don't know which one of these is working, hopefully one or both of them. It's good to see you here. Just as we were singing, our God, He is alive. For some strange reason, I have a hankering for a cookie. Now, for those of y'all who were here for our singing a couple of weeks ago on Wednesday night, you know what I'm talking about. For the rest of y'all, you just have to ask us. We had Tina Dean had some special cookies made with 728B on them. And the instructions were you could only eat one of those cookies if you knew what 728B was. Unfortunately, most of the young people had no idea because it's now become a part of our songbook. But 728B is Our God is Alive. It's a great song. And speaking of great, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. No, I am not Scott Bowman. I'm not Scott. I didn't even get permission to use that. But we're giving Scott a break for a few weeks. You're still with me today, but in the next couple of weeks, you're going to have some really good speakers, some really good ministers, really good servants, I'll put it that way, to speak to you, to encourage you, to admonish you to love and good works. So be sure that you're here. Make sure that you're tuning in. If you're tuning in on the live stream, check in. And today, just stick around and endure with me, if you would. And yes, our sermon this week is going to be about secrets and mysteries. In fact, it's actually, I'm going to be speaking like 2 or 3 times before the end of the year, and it's going to be part of a series. This week we're going to focus on secrets, not dirty little secrets, like it's probably what first comes to mind whenever somebody says secrets, kind of like if you break something at somebody's house and you secret. Or somebody is expecting, but don't tell anybody it's a secret. It's not that type of a secret that we're going to be talking about. We're going to start out talking about recipes. Now, for those of y'all who know me, I love cooking. And that's not a secret. It may be a mystery, but it's not a secret if you know me very well that I do love to cook. And I just have to admit, I am a pretty good cook. Now, I'm no Neil Carey, okay? I want that understood right up front. I'm not that bad, but I'm a pretty good cook. In fact, speaking of Neil Carey, in secret, my mom made the best pecan pie on earth in the world. Until I tasted Neil Carey's pecan pie. And kind of messed me up. I enjoyed it, I loved it. My mom, the upper part of the pie from my mom was great, equal to Neil's, but it was the crust. So one day I had to ask Neil, I said, what is the secret to your crust? He told me the secret to his crust. That's between me and Neil. That's a secret. I'm not going to tell you that one. Okay. But I love to find, this is the type of secret I'm talking about. When you see somebody do something, when you see somebody make something, if you see something that really intrigues you, that maybe is a little bit enticing, a little bit more than what you're used to seeing or having, don't you kind of want to go up to them and say, what's your secret? You know, I like this. What's your secret? One of my signature dishes, if not my signature dish, is baked beans. And they are, I get a lot of compliments on it. I don't mind bragging, like the guy said. It's not bragging, it's just fact. They're very, very good. And then a few years back, over the last couple of years, I tasted a couple of different baked beans that I kind of thought rivaled mine. And that, again, that bothered me a little bit. So I actually went to the people The first one was mustard. I do not put mustard in my baked beans, okay? I have a whole lengthy list of things, but I don't put mustard in it. And that just kind of gave a little extra twang. I liked it, I loved it. But now the other one, and this one is so weird. This one is one of those mysteries, secrets that you wouldn't see coming. A good friend of mine, Karen Phillips, chops up Granny Smith apples and puts in her baked beans. Yeah, that's what I thought. No, it's good. It's good. And my point to that is not just sometimes we want to find out how other people do things that are different or better than what we have. Sometimes our first response is, I'm not sure I won't do that. That doesn't sound good. But if you try it, sometimes you find out that it's the things that you least expect in life that are the most satisfying. And that's kind of the direction we're going with the lesson this morning, because we're going to be talking, as Dennis read the passage from Philippians chapter 4, verses 10 through 13. The Apostle Paul there's a couple phrases in there we're going to focus on. First of all, the phrase, I've learned to be content. How many of you all are, I put glasses on so I can see this. How many of you would consider yourself content? Thank you. How many of you consider yourself content? How many of you think that the world considers themselves content? I need more money, I need a bigger house, I need a newer car, I need a better job, I need a vacation, I need. We're not a very content people, generally speaking, in our society today. And unfortunately, that has rubbed off into our spiritual concerns. It rubbed off into our spiritual lives and the way that we live our lives. We're not always content. We're always wanting something more. We're always wanting something better. Now, first of all, please understand that contentment does not mean that, I'll just settle for what I got. Many of y'all know that Peggy and I have been married about 4 years. She got the anniversary card for me that said, you're the answer to my prayers. Oh. And I opened it up and said, you're not exactly what I prayed for, but apparently you're the answer. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about just settling for what you got. Okay? She made a commitment. She was stuck with me. Okay? It's not that. It is being content. If you look at the Greek definition of this, it's being satisfied. It's being fulfilled. I'm content. There used to be commercials back in the 50s and 60s about, it comes from, I think it's carnation, came from contented cows. A baby that is content is one that's got the full belly and laying in the crib, just sleeping up a storm, just happy. That is the contentment that Paul is talking about. He's not talking about just, hey, it's what I've got. Just settling. He's talking about being satisfied, being fulfilled, being content. And I don't know about you, but when I live in a world like I do, and I see all the problems going on around and about me, I will check my watch real quick. When I see all the problems going on around and about me, I want to go up to Paul and say, I want some of that. I want what you've got, because you know what? I think maybe what you got is better than what I got. Tell me, Paul, what's your secret? And he will tell us that in the book of Philippians. But before we go any further on that, I want to back up and give you some context for the book of Philippians, which you probably already know. But just in case, I'm going to run it by you one more time. Acts chapter 16 starts out with Paul. Things are not going all the way that he wants them to. Paul has some intention, some desire, some ambitions to go preach in a certain area. And you know who's standing in his way? You know who's messing him up? It's God. It's the Spirit of God forbidding him to go into a certain area, forbidding him to do this, and directing him into another area. Well, that kind of messes you up whenever you can't even get God on your side. So, but Paul is submissive, and he concedes that, okay, this is, we figured out this is basically what God is trying to get us to do, so let's just go ahead and go. And they go to Philippi, and things are going great there for about that long. And then he gets thrown in prison. Paul and Silas thrown in prison. And I don't know about you, but if I was in his shoes, one of the first things that was going through my mind, you know, God, if you hadn't sent me here, I wouldn't be in prison. If you let me go where I wanted to do, if you let me do what I wanted to do, I think I could have done a better job. But you know what? Paul and Silas were not that way. Thank heavens. In fact, they started singing praises to God in prison, which makes no sense. That's one of those ingredients that you go, I'm not sure. That doesn't make sense. They started singing praises to God. I won't go through the whole story. Miraculously, the doors flew open. The jailer thought that he was going to lose his life because they were all going to escape. Paul said, don't worry, we're all here. They taught him. He and his household was baptized. And so when we get to the book of Philippians, it's interesting in verse 3 where Paul says, I thank my God in all my remembrance of you. Really, all? Yeah, all. All my remembrance of you. Because you see, if I'd had my way, I wouldn't even have been in Philippi. If I'd had my way, I wouldn't have even been in jail. And if I had had my way, there wouldn't have been a Philippian jailer in his household being converted. So I thank God I didn't have my way. I thank God of all my remembrances of you. To see how God was working things in sometimes mysterious ways, things that I didn't understand. But you know what? I kind of learned to trust Him. Like I keep telling my students over at Mid-America, you know what? I think God's got a pretty good track record. And I'm going to stick with it until He messes up. I don't think He's ever going to mess up. Do you? Are you really concerned about that? And that's the point that we get to in this series of secrets. Paul, how can you be so content? Well, first of all, notice the phraseology. He says in verse 11, for I have learned to be content. Now, I want to pick up on that first part of it real quick. Learn. I have the blessing of being able to teach psychology over at Mid-America Christian University. And in the psychology department, that's one of the big debates that we've had for centuries, I guess. What is nature and what is nurture? What do we just come by naturally, or maybe genetically? Or what is it that is nurtured into us? This is one of those things that is nurtured. Paul says, I learned the secret. I learned the secret of being filled, of going hungry, both of having abundance and of suffering need. Verse 11, I've learned to be content. You learn it. How do you learn it? How do you learn it? Again, we're going back to a recipe concept here. There are tons of places to get recipes. It used to be that you'd have to go join a church so that you get one of those ladies' cookbooks. That's where the good stuff came from. Or maybe you were fortunate enough to have a grandma or a mom who was a really good cook. That was me. Not my grandma's. Probably one of my grandmas was a good cook, but my mom was a phenomenal cook. My sister was even better. My wife was even better. I'm working on getting in there. I've got kids that are great cooks. It's just kind of a family tradition for us. But you can get on the internet, and you can get magazines, you can get a recipe any place. But I would start to say I would bet, and I'm a church girl, so I won't say that. I would wager, I would dare to say that the best recipes in life are not the ones that come directly off the pages of a piece of paper. It's the ones that have been tweaked. It's the ones that have those little extra ingredients, the little secret ingredients, the ones that you would go to your grandma and say, I can't make this like you do. What is it that you put in? And sometimes they would tell you, sometimes they wouldn't. The old joke about recipes from the old timers was they never would put all their ingredients on there because they didn't want you making it as good as they did. Well, Paul puts his ingredients in there. But he said he had to learn them. It wasn't anything that he just picked up like that. So Paul, how did you go about learning? Well, he learned a lot of it at Philippi. As we just talked about, he learned an awful lot about how that God works all things together for good to them who love the Lord. Where do you think that thought originated with Paul? Do you think that was something that he just grew up thinking, or if that was something that was nurtured into him, that he learned by sitting in prison and watching doors fly open, and watching more people being converted than he had been able to do earlier in the day when he was out in the crowd. Which takes us to Philippians chapter 2, the book of Philippians. You know the cool thing about the book of Philippians, the whole context of the book of Philippians is, you're not going to believe this, Paul's in jail. Again. And there's probably that sense of in Paul's mind of, yes, I'm in prison again. This is where the good stuff happens. Because if you notice, in the first chapter, he talks about how that, I know that there's some people out there that are taking advantage and they're preaching the gospel just so they can get to me because they know I'm confined to prison. And for me and to you, probably would get frustrated and get stressed about this, but Paul says, you know what? I love it because Jesus Christ is being proclaimed. And in that I will rejoice. Which is the word that Paul will use more in the book of Philippians than any of his other books, is joy and rejoice. Some form of being more than happy. It's a contented happy, a satisfied fulfillment. So as he's sitting in prison writing this, he's just so full of joy. And he will say over again, rejoice. And he said rejoice. Anytime a Jew says something the second time, like Jesus would say very, very, that was their way of saying, okay, this is important, kids. Listen. Repeating is kind of like whenever your mama slapped the face and said, listen to me. Okay, this is important. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. He says, I've learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. How did you learn that, Paul? Because I did it. He was on-the-job training. And every time it happened, at the end of the day, God had met all my needs. The Hebrew writer will say in Hebrews 13, verse 5, make sure that your character is free from the love of money and be content with what you have. For he himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I abandon you. Paul would say in 2 Corinthians 9, verse 8, and God is able to make all grace flow to you so that always having all sufficiency in everything, you may have abundance for every good deed. Does that sound like that's a good recipe? That's something I want to partake in. That's something I want a piece of. Jesus referred to it in John 10:10 as the abundant life. I want that. I want that secret. I want to know how you do that. Tell me what it is, Paul. Go back to Philippians chapter 2. And I'm just going to read a little bit to you. You know this, but you need to hear it again. We all do. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, let each one of you regard one another as more important than himself. Let me stop there. Our society has a messed up view of humility. They think that maybe humility is a weakness. That humility is thinking that, oh, you're so much better than me, or I can live up to your standard, or that's really not what humility is about. Humility is about knowing your place, knowing how you fit into the picture. Know what you are intended for, and then living up to that. Humility is very similar to the word meekness that Jesus would use in the Sermon on the Mount. The concept of blessed are the meek sounds strange. In fact, the word meekness is only used, I think, once in the entire Bible, and they had to go outside the Bible to figure out what that word actually meant in the Greek, and it was used in referencing to harnessing a horse. Okay? The great power that was drawn in, that was harnessed. That's kind of what humility is about. And I want to take this opportunity to put a plug in. If you've got a bulletin, whether you do it online or whether you have a hard copy, there's a section over here, Community of God. I hope you're checking that out each week. We put that out to kind of follow up on the sermons. It's kind of like homework, but if I say homework, you probably flinch, so I'll just say it's an opportunity to continue learning. Okay? And in this opportunity for this week on Monday, it says, read Philippians 2, 3 through 4, consider just how important are you? Okay. If I'm going to esteem somebody more important than me, what's the benchmark? What's my benchmark? To start out with, you've got to know how important you are. And so this says, then check out What Are You Worth by Chad Prather on YouTube. On YouTube. That sounds like on the www. Shows you my ignorance. This is a great little video. It's only about 2 minutes long. It's funny, but it'll hit you. It'll inspire you. And it'll help you recognize where your true worth comes from. Now, that's scheduled for tomorrow. If you want to sneak in and take an early look at it, that's fine. You can do that today. You're not going to get in trouble. Then the other scriptures listed throughout the week are just things for you to keep on. We try to do this every week to give you the opportunity to continue the sermons that Scott delivers, or whoever is up here, to kind of continue that thought so you can work on that. So what are you worth? Well, if I don't think much of myself, it doesn't leave much hope for you. But if I understand my true worth, if I understand my value, if I understand what makes me valuable, and then I make that determination, as Paul will say, do not merely look out for your own personal interest, but also for the interest of others. Have this attitude in yourself, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the very form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself. He took on the form of a bondservant, being made in the likeness of men, and being found in the appearance of a man. This is Jesus Christ. This is the being that was equal to God. He humbled himself, becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Therefore, that's why. Therefore, also God highly exalted him and bestowed upon him the name which is above every name. that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow, those who are in heaven and those on earth, and those under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. So Paul, this contentment, we don't have time to get into it today, but in chapter 2, where he talks about the contented church, where they're all in unity, where they're feeling the bond of the Spirit. This type of contentment that it can exist in the church, that exists in ourselves, in our personal beings. What's your secret? Paul is telling us, as Scott mentioned a couple of weeks ago, have this attitude. And I love the modern day term, which some of the translations now are beginning to use, mindset. Set your mind. Think the way that Jesus thought. It's going to sound a little weird to you at first when you hear how he thinks. In fact, you're going to say, Tim's a nice guy. You know what? The idea that he's better than me? I just can't do that. Well, Jesus did. He didn't think Tim was better than him. He esteemed him as more important. That was Jesus' secret recipe. That's what Paul learned, is to esteem others as more important. And once you get the focus off of yourself, all of a sudden you become aware of everything that's going on around about. And your eyes are open to some blessings that you had never thought about. Poor Paul and Silas sitting in prison. But look at the great victory that God wrought in that prison. When their eyes were open and they esteemed others as more important than themselves, bingo, that was the special part of the recipe. One more thing real quickly. Speaking of the mind, and this is a big thing, and it's not just simply because I teach psychology. Psychology's got a bad rap, okay? There was a guy named Sigmund Freud who probably offended 90% of the world with some of his thoughts. And psychology for a long time had a bad rap. It's considered the work of the devil by a lot of people. But you know what? The best book on psychology ever written is right here. Paul will talk about in Romans 12, verses 2, by the renewing of your mind. We get all wrapped up about, well, James, I want you to act the right way. You know what? God is not grossly concerned about our actions because he knows that those are merely symptoms of our internal thoughts. If you don't believe that, read the Sermon on the Mount. Yeah, I didn't commit adultery. Yes, you didn't have the action, and that's the one you're focused on. But what I want to focus on for just a few minutes, where was your mind? Weren't you lusting? That's what I'm talking about. You can do all the actions. We can fake all the actions, and you can do that all day long. It's not the actions. It's where those actions come from. It's that mindset. And the mindset of Jesus Christ is totally different than the mindset of the world. Today we celebrate independence. Not from England, but from the world. For those of us as Christians, Jesus said, for followers of Christ, he said this: you are in the world, but you are not of the world. We celebrate that every Sunday. Hopefully, we celebrate that every day of our lives. Okay, back to this mind concept, the renewing of your mind. Here's the hard part. Well, it's all hard. It's all going to sound weird. Verse 6 of chapter 4, be anxious, don't worry. Be anxious for nothing, but everything by prayer and supplication, thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Got a story I'll tell you later. And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, shall guard your hearts, your mind in Christ Jesus. It's going to blow your mind. It's going to... No, you're not even going to be able to understand it. It's good. The recipe that I'm giving you, you think you know what good baked beans are, but it's going to blow your mind. You think you know what great spirituality is, but this is going to blow your mind. You're going to get peace beyond your comprehension. Now, here's the kicker. Finally, brother, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, let your mind, dwell on these things. But you don't understand, Paul. I've got all these problems. I've got bills to pay. I've got car in the shop that's supposed to have been out a week ago. And they keep putting me off, keep putting me off. You don't understand, God. There are a lot of good things, but there are more bad things going on for me right now. And Paul will say, it's the wrong recipe. It's the wrong recipe. Thank God for all the blessings. One of the things that you're going to see on the list to do this week is to make a list of your blessings. I'm going to challenge you to do that. Peggy put a poster up, plaque up in our kitchen years and years ago that said, what if you woke up this morning with only the things that you thanked God for yesterday? Think about it. We have so much to be thankful for. We get tied up on the basics. The basics that we look at is food, shelter, all of these things. Read the Sermon on the Mount. That's the exact same thing Jesus talked about. You worry about these things. God knows you need these things. God takes care of these things. Celebrate the things that are true and honest and pure. And before long, you'll find out, you know what, I'm content. I'm content. There is that peace that passes understanding. And it all comes from following the mind of Christ. And as we just got through reading in Philippians chapter 2, it was because of this attitude of not clinging to equality with God. It was because he came to earth and humbled himself and became obedient, even to the point of the cross, that he died, was resurrected. It was because of that God highly exalted him. And that's what we're fixing to celebrate now. Yes, this is the 4th of July, and we celebrate independence. But every week we celebrate a greater independence. And that independence came from the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. So stop for a minute, refocus, take your mind off the cares and concerns of this world, and think about Jesus as we have our communion prayer.